Hey everyone, and welcome to Private Podcast, where we plug in and explore the intersection of privacy, human rights, technology, and democracy. I'm your host, Derek E. Silva, in a very empty room. Today we're speaking with Travis Cannell, who's the head of product for Orchid Labs. He is a marketing professional specializing in user acquisition for the past 10 years for companies including Intuit and Experian. He's grown products from launch to market success through scalable customer acquisition. And now over to the conversation with Travis Cannell. Hey Travis, thanks again for spending some time with us here on the Orchid Private Podcast.
No problem, Derek. I'm really happy to be here.
Terrific. So I already gave an introduction for you. So let's talk a little bit about your background and what you did before working working at Orchid. A little about your background, maybe I don't know, college, university, some other past careers you've had.
I grew up in Montana and went to high school there, and then moved out to California for college at UCSB, starting in 2000. And It's a great place to go to school at UCSB, and that's actually where I got into entrepreneurship
Hmm.
and started. Was studying computer science at the time, but there was a fledgling business school that was starting there that had a sort of certificate program called the Technology Management Program. And they had a business plan competition and some coursework that you could take for the completion of the certificate. And It actually introduced me to entrepreneurship in the broadest sense, but
Right.
also it plugged me into a lot of you know people in the Santa Barbara angel scene at that time. Um, it was a very different environment, you know, where it's 2022 now. The year 2000 and 2001, when I was kind of
Oh yeah.
starting at UCSB, was right after the tech crash. And, Google had not IPO'd. I think when Google IPO'd a few years after that, things started to thaw out a bit. Um, but there was a lot of ideas floating around, and there were some cool companies that spun out from UCSB in that technology management program. One is called Inogen, and I think they're still in business. They actually make a portable oxygen generator,
Oh,
and that was
interesting.
the brainchild of a couple of undergraduates at UCSB, and they grew that out to a huge company. Uh, Alongside that, uh, my older brother Jake, and Jay Freeman, we had a company called Gnostic Labs, and we were making a computer game. And we took second in the business plan competition in 2001, only behind Inogen. So, and we had this big idea of a massively multiplayer online game with a virtual currency, and a lot of ideas that were probably a little bit too early for
Right.
2001. Um, but it was a very exciting time, and that's also how I met Jay and some of the people that I work with now. But we were all at UCSB within this special college called the College of Creative Studies. Jay actually still does teach some classes there and is still kind of involved with students at the College of Creative Studies. It's
Cool.
a really interesting kind of college within a college. So
Nice.
it's kind of how I got my start. And then after college, I did a few things and ended up working in marketing and sales. So I never really used my computer science degree for engineering or software, you know, exactly, um, or
Been there, done that.
programming
I know
really.
that
So
feeling.
I kind of took a different career track. Yeah,
Yeah.
and eventually moved back to LA and got in with a company called DocStock and did marketing for them, growth marketing. Also did product. It was the first time did some product management for them, but really stuck with a growth marketing team, and we were acquired by Intuit, and then I worked on the QuickBooks kind of products, and then I started working for Orchid. So
Cool. That's a
it's
pretty
kind of a
good
brief summary there
yeah.
of what I've been up to.
That's a pretty good career track. Go to college, end up with tech companies, pretty much right away, and then continued on since then. Gnostic, I guess, would have been right around the same time EverQuest was had really taken off, right? Like I have friends who played that in high school. 97 to 2001, and they call it Evercrack because it was so addictive. And I
Yeah.
think there was an in-game currency. I never got into it. So, but it sounds like you, I don't know, maybe wanted to build something similar or like your own version of that, or you thought you could do something way cooler. Like
Yeah.
what was the inspiration for building your own MMO RPG?
From playing EverQuest, from playing Ultima Online, and from playing other games like that, and really getting interested in the virtual currency aspects. There was a lot of games where you actually could pay for in-game items, but they never were kind of built into the game. They were never also built into the economics of the game. So the
Right,
game designers were kind of doing this whack-a-mole thing to try to prevent that from happening. Um, because it's a bit at odds when you have a game and you want people to come in and have a good experience with the game right when they start, um, and they get killed by somebody who's spent hundreds of dollars to make like a better character. Like
right,
you end up with this game where you kind of have this top echelon of players that are just preying on the other players, and you as a game designer, you don't want that to happen. You want more people to come in and play. So um, but we were thinking about it. It was probably most similar to this game that is still around called Eve Online that actually started around the same time.
right.
Which I don't know if you've heard of that game, but that's
Yeah.
actually made by this team in Iceland. A very unique game, very successful. They've had a great run, almost 2 decades, and they still have a pretty rabid fan base of people that love that game. So um, I don't think that they have an in-game currency that's kind of traded like a cryptocurrency. Um, you know, but I think when you see kind of what's happening now with some of these play-to-earn games, that are trying to take better tokenomic models into a game. I don't know if there's any runaway successes yet. Obviously, there's Axie Infinity and some games like that,
Right.
but their interest kind of goes up and down with some of the token fluctuation and different things. I don't know if they've totally nailed it yet, but it's a very interesting innovation space. And yeah, we were thinking about that kind of in 2000, 2001, and had to make a whole graphic engine. And this was kind of before, I think, Unity and some of the other off the shelf stuff was really easy to use to make games.
Right.
So there was kind of a lot to it. But
And what about meeting Jay? Like, did was I think that came through Jake. With like, were they in classes together? Were they teaching together, or did you have a class with Jay Freeman as well?
so both. I mean, really, the College of Creative Studies is a different method of teaching where it gives all the undergraduate students graduate level privileges.
Hmm.
So it's great because you could take any class that you want in the entire school without any prerequisites, and then you could drop it up to the last day of instruction with no consequence. Like it would just fall off your transcript. So
Wow.
it we kind of and then you could teach classes within the College of Creative Studies. So my brother was teaching a class on, I think it was like game environments, something like that, and that's where he met Jay. And then I came. That was a year before I was in school, and so then I came the next year, and I kind of met Jay there at the College of Creative Studies. So he was friends with my brother, and then I kind of came on and found the business plan competition and convinced us to kind of like try to form a company and do the business plan
Okay.
competition and stuff where we took
Cool.
second. So that's kind of, I got to know Jay really well during that process. There was also some other CCS people that were involved in the computer game project that I'm not really in touch with anymore. But then I became good friends with Jay throughout my uh, 5 years at UCSB and at College of Creative Studies. So
Cool. Okay. Thanks for the additional color there. Um, when did you first discover Bitcoin then?
yeah, so I don't remember when this article came out, but there was an article in Wired And I think that's when I first heard about Bitcoin. I remember being in my girlfriend's apartment, my now wife, and I was sitting there with my brother. We're kind of hanging out. I think he might have been visiting LA, and she just happened to have a subscription to Wired magazine, and I was flipping through it, and I was like, oh, what is this Bitcoin? And I think it was, this article was written when it went from $7 to like $30, and then back to
Mm.
$7. And so
Okay.
the bubble peaked and crashed.
Right. It's over.
But it was just, how can it store, as any, somebody that's like loves technology, that likes virtual currencies, kind of like studied computer science, and understands the theory of computer science. The Byzantine general problem of coordination is very interesting, that seemed to be solved in this way. Also, as somebody who
Right.
just saw the you know to what happened in 2008, sort of this sort of massive bailout. No one really seeming to be held accountable for all this crazy stuff that happened,
Yeah.
and it just seemed like you wanted something a little bit different. And so you have this great origin story of this uh, kind of character. No one still knows who it is, and created this new virtual currency and sort of tied it to the 2008 financial crisis, because seemingly creating more money and bailing people out seems like the move, ever since long-term capital management went under in the late 90s. That seems seemingly like no one wants to hold these people to account. It's not like the
Right.
savings and loan crisis or something, but so Bitcoin just kind of had all these things that were very interesting, and that's kind of when I first heard about it. Is in that Wired article. I think that came out in 2011 or something, maybe 2013, somewhere in there, kind of the
Pretty early
early
then.
teens.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
And so you had, a good career trajectory. Company you were working for got acquired, and you ended up at Intuit. So what then took you from Intuit over to Web3, blockchain, cryptocurrency, whatever term you want to use to describe it? How did you end up here with, well, I came to you eventually, but how did you end up here with Orchid?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's see. I was Intuit acquired DocStock, and then about a year and a half after the acquisition, they closed the office and they laid off about 80% of the staff.
Oh, wow.
But luckily, by that time, I was moved on to a marketing team that was based in the Bay Area and at Intuit's headquarters. So I was kind of off the main core things that DocStock was doing. So they kind of kept me on. They wanted to work with me, and so I was actually traveling up and down to the Bay Area a lot with Intuit. And then Jay actually came to my house in LA, just really randomly, because I hadn't seen him for many years before that, and kind of approached me. He said that this company Orchid, and I had heard of Orchid just through some press releases and stuff due to their fundraising,
Right.
and said that Orchid needs some help with marketing. So I came on board to work on Orchid's marketing pretty early on. This is before we had released our product and network and token and everything. So it's kind of late, or it's kind of the summer of 2018 is really when I came on.
Okay. That was really early on. I mean, like I think most people didn't even hear about Orchid until 2017, 2018. The network launched in 2019. So you were like not a co-founder, but you've been here since almost day one then, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I think I'm the seventh or eighth employee, somewhere in there. Yeah, for part certainly under the first 10. I'll
Yeah,
say that.
that's good.
So
Good stuff.
yeah, it's been quite
So
a ride.
yeah, so can you tell us a little bit more about your current role at Orchid then? Like you started doing marketing early on. I have a pretty good handle of what you do, but I'm sure lots of other people don't and would like to hear some more.
Yeah, definitely. So I started off, like we said, doing marketing work, and then I moved over to the product side. kind of after we released the product, we wanted to put some more focus on usage, the funnel, trying to get more people kind of using the app and stuff like that. So
Right.
I jumped in there and kind of dusted off some old product marketing, and also do product marketing, but dusted off some of my old product work. I did do some product work at DocStock, but yeah, so that's what I do now, and sort of just help still do some marketing work as well as product marketing work, and then also product work and things like helping with customer service and lots of things like that. Try to really narrow down when we find problems with our VPN and different configurations,
Yeah.
testing things, and then advocating for, you know, adding new features and kind of pushing development in certain ways.
What do you think? Like, what would you say is some of the biggest differences between managing product or even marketing, if you want to talk about that instead, for a crypto related product as opposed to a more Web two or even an on premise type product, depending on what you were working on at Intuit.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It is
Thank you.
a lot harder to work on a Web3 crypto-based project. Um, I think we could go on and on this, but I think just to kind of broach it, I think the in Web 2, you go out to your customers, you test with them, you talk to them, you figure out what they want. Maybe they don't even know what they want, so you try to intuit that, like
Hmm.
the Apple methodology, where no one said they wanted a touch screen until they actually tried it, and then everyone wanted a touch screen.
Yeah.
But in general, you're interfacing with the marketplace, and Intuit was really good at this. QuickBooks, everyone that worked on the QuickBooks team, even if you were a developer, you had to talk to a customer at least once a year. So like, um, you got to like kind of live. We were working with self-employed people, so we Uber and Lyft drivers we talked to a lot. There's a
Mm.
lot of ways to easily talk to self-employed people. Like, how do you do your taxes? How do you track mileage? It was a tax product. And then you take those things and those become insights and feedback that you feed into product development and, for prioritizing features. And the product then starts to shape itself, in the kind of user's image.
Right.
And it's a fairly straightforward process. When you get into blockchain, the it starts to get really tricky, not only because there's inherent like problems with blockchain, not really problems, but user interface issues with blockchain, where you're dealing with crypto wallets and exchanges and things like that. So now
Hmm.
you have to, self custody your own money, and you're using dApps. So there's a lot of new technology that a user needs to use. But and we run into this with Orchid a lot. There's a lot of other considerations that are important. So you have game theoretical models of how a network should work and how different things should work. And those all have to have a place right alongside of, what the user wants.
Yeah.
So oftentimes there's a lot of trade-offs where you're trying to understand what the users wants. You know kind of some of the feature sets that they want, but then you know that like in a game theoretic way or in ways that are really truly fully decentralized, you can't really provide that to the user. And so I think that that's where blockchain becomes the product management hat. It becomes a lot harder to deal with a lot of that, a lot of the sort of design and the type of design that you see in white papers and tokenomics and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think then on top of that, just from like a product marketing perspective, because of everything that you have to do to get these tokens and manage them and stuff, it's just a lot more documentation. And so then there's a lot of different ways that people are getting sort of lost along that funnel that you have to think about.
Yeah. And just touching on something you just said there, so then, like, why does decentralization even matter to you personally? Like, that's you're right. This is I've been in crypto full time for over 4 years now. educating people on the fact that they are literally holding the keys to the bank, that bank being their wallet app
Hmm.
at this point, and or the private key, whatever whatever nomenclature or whatever you're backing up, um, is it's exciting at times, but it's also incredibly frustrating at other times, depending on who you're talking to and their level of knowledge coming to the situation. Um, I think it's especially since 2008, I think it's really important for people to have a better understanding of where their money is, who has control of it. We've seen all sorts of situations with Greece, people's banks literally being scalped off the top because the government needs the money, and hyperinflation in places like Zimbabwe, Argentina, Venezuela going through all sorts of issues, because of poor governance ultimately, and people literally have almost no recourse. And so there's lots of reasons that I came to, this conclusion of like, this is a much better way, even though it's going to take us years, possibly decades, to teach everybody how
Hmm.
to do all this. What about you? Like, hearing about Bitcoin and thinking it's super cool and solving the Byzantine generals problem. I mean, that's cool, but like, you know, you and I are both in an industry where we're literally trying to teach billions of people now a different way. Why does that matter
Yeah.
to you?
Yeah. I mean, the what happened in Greece and Cyprus really jumps to mind. I have some family that is from Russia. I live here
Mm,
now, but in the '80s, and when the Soviet Union fell, I mean, you'd wake up and your bank account would be cut in half. There's many countries that just when they start to hit inflation, not only do they jump to price controls, but they also try to take money from just average citizens' accounts. Um, in like the United States, I think we have pretty strong protections for private property.
right.
But even then, if you're suspected of a crime or the property is suspected of a crime, it can be taken away from you. Um, and I think there's just a lot of cases where suddenly a bank freezes all your assets, and for a couple of different reasons, some justified, maybe some not justified. But of course, it's one of those things where they want to kind of cover all their bases, and pretty soon you're like, wow, all this money that you thought was safe in a bank, is it really? Like, how safe really is that?
Yeah.
um, and then of course you have the other huge black tail risks, like what you see in Ukraine, which is just so saddening. But also you see, some people saying, well, all my money's gone, the bank is gone, I can't get any money out of this bank anymore, but I do have a little bit of crypto that I,
Yeah.
put in a brain wallet, or I put in a Trezor, or I put on a piece of paper, and I smuggled that out. And I think that gives me hope that this is really, a new type of financial technology, a new type of money that is important, and that is making a difference. So, I think, I mean, the first taste of all that I got was the back in the banking crisis when that stuff happened in Greece and Cyprus. I think they did a 20% haircut. Just
Yeah.
lost 20. Everyone just lost 20% of their money, and there's nothing they could do.
Yeah.
So, when you really look at what a bank account is, I mean, it's an agreement to pay you back with all these caveats. It's really like it's money in the bank, but also it's an IOU that they will pay you back this money,
Right.
if you meet all this criteria, and if you understand all the disclosures and everything that's in this massive agreement. Whereas, you know, you can hold a gold bar and stuff. That's money, but it's not electronic. Bitcoin really gives you a way to hold something, to custody something that can't be taken away from you. That is money. It's not debt. It's real money. So,
Right.
um, I think it is a really new thing, and money hasn't really been innovated for a while. So, um, I like to read. I've read the Bitcoin Standard, and I like to read some books like that. just to get different perspectives over a long-term thinking about money and what makes money, and why Bitcoin, sort of how Bitcoin could perhaps fit into that, and of course other cryptocurrencies as well.
Yeah. Um, I got a quick story, and then I'll ask you the next question. Shortly after I was appointed to my local municipal council, which I'm no longer on. Um, I don't talk a lot about it on the show, but that was a interesting 4 year period. The local journalist at the time, who was a young woman in journalism school, found out I was into crypto because it was right around the same time, and like sat down with me and asked me about like, well, is it real money? I said, well, is the Canadian dollar real money? And she's like, well, yeah. I said, but according to who? Like it's you're trusting the government that they'll back it, right? Or you're trusting that the bank will give it to you when you go to the bank machine or you go to a teller and say like, I'd like $20, please. And but if you hand it to somebody, somebody could say like, this product is not worth it's not worth $20 anymore. Now it's worth 50 or what have you. Or but like removing the gold standard in the US and similar measures overseas. I don't even know if we even had a gold standard here, but like when you remove any sort of backing,
Mhm.
you're literally just trusting the government's word that a dollar is a dollar, and you go to the store and that's what you can buy for a dollar. And I remember the municipality's treasurer give me a side eye at the time of like, oh God. And I went, "What, like, am I wrong? Like
Like,
there's nothing backing a Canadian dollar except for the government saying, please trust us." And I'm well aware, like I'm a municipal politician now. I'm literally part of local government, but I'm also trying not to BS people. And she's like, okay, yeah, no, you're right. And I'm like, okay, like I'm not trying to stir the pot here. I'm just saying, like, this is the reality. Like
yeah,
Andreas
if
Antonopoulos,
you look deep enough, yeah.
yeah, if you listen to him and talk about the US dollar or any other fiat currency and what's backing it, it's literally trust, thin air. So if you compare that
Mhm.
to Bitcoin, Ether, Litecoin, Dogecoin, anything else, it's you end up, in more or less in the same place, or at least, oh well, this Bitcoin's worthless something because it actually costs money to make that, a computer put in the effort to do and
And
to secure the
secure,
network,
yeah.
etc. Same with Ether, for now until it moves to proof of stake. But like regardless, there's still a mechanism for
Mhm.
securing that monetary system or that currency. And to me, it puts it at least on par with fiat currencies. And depending on your perspective, obviously, it could put it ahead of fiat currencies for currencies you trust. I don't own any Shiba Inu. I don't
Yeah.
own any Dogecoin or anything like that because those are mostly silly. Great entry points if you're learning about crypto. That's great. But
Mhm.
yeah, I just I came back to this place of like there's nothing proving that of $1 Canadian is worth $1 Canadian except for the government saying that it is. So why not look at other things? And anyway, um,
Yeah, I mean, fiat basically, that's the definition of fiat, right? Which is just by decree. This is worth something because we say it is.
yeah,
It's um, and the dollar did do this magic great thing where it was the only currency that was backed by gold. I believe. Well, there's probably, I think Swiss also is backed by gold,
a
but
couple, but not many.
and then when it became clear that that backing was going to fall apart, they just said, "Oh, um, just this is kind of a temporary thing." They sort of downplayed that. This doesn't change anything. Don't worry, don't worry. There's no man behind the curtain. This is
Yeah,
fine. And we've embarked now on a maybe 50-year experiment into just complete fiat. And you know, I think a lot of the gold bug type people continually get sidelined, and a lot of their prophecies haven't come to fruition. But 50 years isn't also that long in terms of timescales of monetary policy and history.
right.
The fiat currencies throughout history all go to zero. Um, you know, but no
That's the
country's
problem.
lasted forever either. So You know,
True.
like if fiat currency is great until your country gets invaded or until some sort of war happens. I mean, then all bets are off, and no one
Yeah.
really knows what's going to happen. It's very uncertain. Um, I think it's interesting now seeing there's certain times where gold spikes or Bitcoin spikes, and or Bitcoin drops and gold spikes.
Hmm.
So I think there's people that are really trying to think about where to store their money that it's like ultimately safe. I think it's a difficult question. Just from after reading that, sitting in that living room and reading that Wired article, I could not fathom that we would be here in 2022 talking about Bitcoin, having Jerome Powell talk about Bitcoin, having the president talk about Bitcoin. Um, it's just mind blowing to me. Having countries saving in Bitcoin,
Yeah.
could not have seen that coming. You
Building
know,
their own mines next to a
so
volcano.
it's already kind of yeah, it's already kind of proved itself in that respect. And so I when I jumped into the crypto industry, I thought to myself, well, I had a great kind of tech FANG job, not FANG exactly, because Intuit is older than all those companies. It's kind of the dinosaur tech company that's been around since the 80s, but it's doing a lot of things right. But it was kind of had that FANG kind of tech job. And I was like, well, this crypto thing, it's either going to be wildly successful or it's just going to like blow up. And either way, I want to like a front row seat. So
Yeah.
pretty happy with jumping onto Orchid, and it's been quite a ride. And I think we've accomplished a lot, and I'm really sold on Orchid's mission, over the long term.
Awesome. Thanks for that color. Uh, so speaking about Orchid, like, what do you can you explain to people, what makes Orchid's VPN different from other privacy tools, whether it's centralized VPNs or anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think a good place to start is, Orchid is not really a VPN. Like Orchid doesn't run VPN servers. Oftentimes people come up and, they're like, "Oh, where are your servers? Are you in the Five Eyes? Can you tell us? Are you spying but you can't tell us? You can't answer that." I'm like, "Well, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't run servers. We have no servers. We're not a VPN service company. We're not like a centralized entity that takes a subscription and then provides a service. We're
Right.
we're mathematicians, we are technologists, or programmers, or marketers, and what we're trying to do is to create a uh, decentralized systems that can interoperate over the very long term, and create a more private world where we have a new tool kind of available to us. So I think when we look at it over the very long term, the goal of Orchid is to make a decentralized kind of onion routing network where you can just grab randomized nodes and build a route that is very hard to trace. And so
Right.
it's kind of like um, and that's kind of like the end goal. We've our CEO, Dr. Stephen Waterhouse, talks a lot about um, the centralization of communication choke points, and you know how important it is to try to decentralize those things. So so that's kind of how we're approaching things. We're a little bit different in that we're not trying to pair you with a VPN provider that gives you more of a normal traditional VPN service. Um, we
Right.
have kind of a decentralized network and stake weighted random selection where you just get a random server every time you want a connection, which is great. Which is great if you're not trying to exit your traffic in a particular place, but also it's great because there's the extra security and the randomization over who you're connecting to. So it's not like you're
Right.
connecting to the same VPN over and over again, and then that VPN's IP address is now, just almost like yours. It's more of like, well, every time you connect, you get a different random one. So, and also what we've designed is something, and when I say longer term, I'm talking over 10, 20 years, something that like can really, if an ultimate decentralized test is if the company stopped existing, would everything continue? Um, and with
Right.
Orchid, I don't think that we're entirely there yet, but obviously that is also a goal. But some of those things hopefully like shine some color on why Orchid's a little bit different from a traditional VPN. But some of the other things is like we have a layer two that we're now describing as a probabilistic rollup. So there's finality is done with probability as opposed to like the zero knowledge rollups or the optimistic rollups. Um, and that
Hmm.
allows for really tiny payments. So I believe I shouldn't just throw it out there, but it's very, very tiny payments. You're sending a payment like every 4 or 5 packets. So this is a lot different from even like some of the other roll ups that are sending pennies. I mean, this is like thousands, 100, like I think it's 1/1000th of a penny that you're typically sending to pay for bandwidth. So that's very interesting. We have our own VPN tunneling protocol that is similar to a WireGuard or an Open VPN, and that kind of is how it works. So there's some pretty big tech pieces with Orchid that go alongside just the server code, the client code, and then our DApp and stuff like that.
Okay, good. I think that's helpful. Um, so like maybe coming back to this, like Orchid's not running any of the nodes, but of course there's in-app purchases. So maybe just shed a
Mhm.
little bit of light for people who maybe are thinking like, well, that seems like a dichotomy. Like you're not running the service, okay, but you're taking in-app purchases. So maybe just explain a little bit about how that works, in general, that we could probably move on.
Yeah, sure. We did so when we first launched. Um, we the only way to run Orchid was to attach, basically use our DApp, move funds into our L2, and then connect that to the app and run it. And obviously, there was like 15 steps to do that, and we were concerned, wow, this is really difficult. Um, also there's sometimes Apple can be a little bit wary if you're trying to get people to pay for things outside of their ecosystem. So I think our initial app was denied, basically with some of that reasoning. Um,
Right.
so the one of the solutions that we had been kicking around even before launch was this idea of a prepaid access credit. And how that works is you're just buying a credit to uh, pay for service on the Orchid network. And Orchid is sort of like selling those credits. Um, so it's kind of an elegant way to get a user to easily exchange their local fiat to get 5, 10, or $20 of credit on our network, and the VPN providers accept those credits. The provider network, we have a page on our website that describes more of this for people that are interesting. But the provider network are people that have chosen to participate in this prepaid access credit system. So the only downside with this prepaid access credit system is it's not open in that the credits cannot be paid to people that we don't know. So random providers that join the network can't be paid in credits. So there's some pros and cons, but I found it, one of the fastest, easiest onboarding flows in all of crypto. And I've tried a lot of products, but
Hmm.
you can buy $5 Orchid account within a minute, and then your
Yeah.
app has ownership over that kind of crypto. You're sort of managing it. You can spend it on our network. The credits, you can't pull that crypto out into your wallet, so it's a little bit restricted from it's can only be spent on our network. But I think
Right.
yeah, so that's but that's, different from us actually taking a subscription or running any VPN servers ourselves. But that system is really cool, and
Right.
I think it's helped a lot of people play with our VPN and try it out.
Okay. Before we started recording, you talked about how some NFT thieves, I think, or no, so people who created a project and then rug pulled thought they were being super smart by using VPNs and using Tornado Cash
Mm.
to mix some funds and stuff like that. What do you think some of the biggest misconceptions are about VPNs, whether it's Orchids, decentralized marketplace that's been built, or another one?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. I think, that one article we were talking about is some guys in LA. I think they're 20 years old, and it's actually a pretty sad story. But quick cash. I think they each made a couple $1 million by doing this NFT rug pull. Um, but and then they tried to cover their tracks with a VPN. They also tried to use Tornado Cash. They didn't do it successfully. The government it was able to find out. And then that looks really bad because then they have a trail. That it's much easier to prove that they were trying to commit fraud by covering their tracks.
Right.
You know, I, I've been working in this, for 3 or 4 years. And I get into a lot of conversations at conferences or people learning that I'm working at a VPN, specifically a decentralized VPN, because then they start thinking, oh my God, and then you're just all these bad people you're helping. Um, or you get in these really esoteric conversations about like, well, what does the government know, and like, what about the NSA and stuff, and you're just like, dude, those guys will figure it out. They are going to figure it out. You are going to lose. I mean, you can try to like put on a disguise, go to coffee shops, change your cars. I mean, you can Jason Bourne it, but guess what, you're probably going to lose. And if you think a decentralized VPN is going to save you, it's not. There's a million other things that are going to go wrong. And I think that case sort of highlights that.
Yeah.
Um, I think where there are specific, cases where a VPN really helps. Like one very simple one is when your internet service provider has a firewall restriction in place. A VPN can help you immediately circumnavigate that firewall. So sometimes that could be,
Right.
an entire country that is managing its internet service and has forced all the ISPs to blacklist websites, blacklist tools, blacklist communication tools. We see that across the world. Indonesia has a firewall. China has a firewall. Certain countries sometimes block Twitter, block Facebook, to stop the spread of disinformation.
Turkey, Nigeria.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
during my time at
Brazil
Orchid,
just blocked Telegram temporarily, stuff like that.
I've seen tons of that happening, and um, VPNs can work for that. I guess on the flip side too, VPNs can sometimes become the thing that's blocked as well. That's where a decentralized network of VPN providers can sometimes be helpful because you have a couple of different providers you can try, like on the Orchid network. But even just VPNs in general can be helpful for that kind of use case. And then just general privacy from your internet service provider. So in America, do you have Cox cable, or do you have, whoever your internet service provider is? They're able to monitor every website that you're going to, and then they sell that data, maybe without your consent
Yeah.
or knowledge, to third-party marketers who are then collecting that data and then cross-referencing it with other data that they can get maybe from your phone to build out like a more complete marketing profile for you. And while that might not have specifically your name, if they do have your IP address, that's a lot of information. It's a whole lot of information to have is your IP address. Even Orchid, we, don't log anything, but it's, like we really, even on the server side for our web server, we don't want anything, any IP address or any information like that. It's just too much. So VPNs can provide some privacy from internet service providers. So that's kind of another good use case. And then there's other things, other kind of reasons out there. But yeah, to commit crimes and then try to hide yourself, VPN is maybe not the best route to go. You've got to go full Jason Bourne, and I really can't help you with that. So, um, but
Yeah.
I think the cases that really strike a chord for us are the different censorship use cases and some of the stuff that we were talking about. And I know in working on the community side of things, you get to see a lot of that up close and personal. And that's something that we want to do more of, make sure that we're working well for those use cases. And it's kind of a lot of tech. I feel like a lot of stuff is coming together lately though with Orchid in terms of supporting more blockchains as payment methods. So the decentralized kind of payment system works better, so people can take their own crypto, make their own accounts, kind of control their own destiny a little bit, which is much more in the crypto ethos. And we're not held hostage by high gas fees on Ethereum anymore. Although the core parts of our network are on Ethereum, the directory contract and a lot of the other key smart contracts are held in Ethereum. So we get the kind of the best of both worlds of having the payment system sort of in a different chain than the security and some of the core, like the staking directory and some of the places where a lot of the money is stored. So,
Right. Cool. Okay. We're coming up to time here, so I don't want to, and I don't want to go overboard. I think probably the I'd like to end here. Is this the future of the internet? Web3, self-custody wallets, potentially, a domain that points at your wallet and stuff like that if you wanna do that. But the stuff Orchid is building, that Ethereum has built and continues to build, the Ethereum community, the Bitcoin community, etc. Do you think this is the future of the internet, or do you think maybe we end up in some sort of um, middle ground where there's lots of things that are decentralized, but you know, lots of centralized systems can continue to persist?
I'll say this. I mean, we could kind of leave Orchid out of it, but I think if we think about, Web3, I think that there's a lot of people saying, oh, we're all going to move to self custody, but TikTok's super popular. I mean, I think I was on an Orchid call this week, and people are talking about TikTok and how, yeah, I didn't try it. Then I tried it. I loved it. Now I just have to use it. It's where I get all this information. It's not. I don't think Facebook or Twitter or these things are going away. So sometimes I think people, it's like I'm not on Mastodon. I'm not trying any of the Web3 alternatives to social media networks. I think that people do know what they're doing when they post on Facebook. They're giving up that data. They want their friends to see it. They want the rush of dopamine that they getting the likes and the comments and stuff. I just think that that's so powerful. Um, TikTok has bottled that up in a way that maybe is even the most powerful. But I think that kind of centralization and trade off that people are making will probably continue into the future. I just don't see any trend pointing away from anything like that that I have seen. Although people talk
Yeah.
about it a lot in the abstract as being bad, like they're on Twitter, yeah, 30 minutes later.
Talking about how bad it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, so yeah, so I think, but I do think when it comes to other the pieces of infrastructure, decentralization is really key. I've read some of Jay's messages on this, and I think it's pretty interesting in some of his Hacker News threads. But um, to do decentralized tiny payments or decentralized incentivized networks, you really have to use crypto. There's no other way to do it. And if you look at distributed
Right.
systems and large distributed systems, I think that crypto is really going to be the future there. How those things kind of shape up, I think it's still pretty early. But I think that there's going to be a lot of use case. I think the ultimate kind of crypto use case is going to be something that really Web 2 just doesn't solve at all. And then that, where you need some sort of, you need computers that are trying to do some sort of large distributed problem that need to trade money back and forth much faster than humans could. And cryptocurrency is
Hmm.
one of the few things that solves that. So it adds money to the decentralized network. Um, but that's yeah, that's kind of what I see where I sit, and I also echo kind of what our CEO talks about, but you know, decentralized forms of communication. I think that that's coming more and more into play. So we see kind of this conflict unroll out in Ukraine, and then in other parts of the world as well, in Africa. I think there's going to be a push towards more power to people to use different communication services, not only VPNs, but things like Starlink to get access to the internet. Everyone wants access to the unfettered internet so that they can share their stories, share their life. And, I think because of that, it's why we get such a good look into what's happening in some of these countries and we can try to help. Um, so I think it does that
Right.
aspect is making a difference now and will kind of into the future.
Okay. I think that's a great place to end it. Thanks so much, Travis, for spending some time with us here
Cool.
on Private Podcast. If someone wants to maybe hear more about what you're doing or saying, is there a place where we can point them to do that?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, Travis at Travis Cannell, and or I get email Travis at Orchid.
There you go. You just doxed your email address. All right. Thanks a
That's
lot
fine. I think
for
it's been on a couple of presentations. So
yeah, probably. All right. Thanks a lot again. And for everybody listening or watching, until next time, stay free.